Think of the Nintendo Switch. Think of all the features it has and the impressive things that it can do. Did you remember that it has a touchscreen? I sure didn't, and I've been using the system for days. In my defense, there weren't many indicators that it existed. I bought 3 games for the Switch at launch, those being The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Fast Star MX, and Snipper Clips. The launch lineup provided a lot of variety, as I was able to pick 3 completely different styles of game, each from different developers. None of them use the touchscreen. The only place I've used it is briefly in menus, but as the menus work perfectly fine with a controller layout, the touch compatibility is redundant. I have no objections to the Switch having a touchscreen. In fact, it could be used very well in the future, and 1 or 2 small games do already use it. It's just amazing that the first ever Nintendo device to have a multi-touch capacitive screen does nothing to boast this feature, especially considering that this technology would have bumped up the Switch's overall price. Now, it is fair to argue that having an extra underutilized feature isn't a detriment to the console, but remember that the Switch also has an infrared sensor that detects hand gestures. This is where the original question mutates into a related but very different question. Did you buy 1-2 Switch? 1-2 Switch, if you haven't heard of it yet, is a party game made by Nintendo. It's a collection of 28 minigames that each last under 60 seconds. The game was designed for a party environment where 2 players face off against each other without looking at the screen. For example, one minigame hosts a quick draw, where each player has to unholster their controller and shoot the other first. Another is a tense showdown, where one player tries to catch the other's sword. How much would this concept be worth in your eyes? $15? $20? 1-2 Switch costs $50. The game is too expensive. Many people expected it to be a pack-in game with the Switch, much like how Wii Sports sold the idea of motion controls to the masses. Instead, we have a full-price tech demo that can really only be enjoyed in a party setting. 1-2 Switch is easily the weakest aspect of the Switch launch, not for what it provides, but for its absence. I'll go out on a limb and say that most people haven't bought the game, because the system itself with several games was already pushing their budget. That was definitely the case for me, despite my passing interest in the title. Therefore, the game that utilises the Joy-Con's IR sensor, gyroscope and accelerometer was one that many will not experience. What about HD Rumble? I was thrilled at the idea of highly accurate rumble motors inside such a small controller, but I've been left unimpressed because most games don't use it in a way that stands out. Hell, Breath of the Wild doesn't support it at all. In contrast to this, 1-2 Switch features a minigame where you have to tilt the Joy-Cons to determine how many virtual balls are inside. This would be the perfect example of the hardware's capabilities, but now it's limited to the low percentage of Switch owners who pick the game up. As such, we're in a situation where the most interesting features of the Joy-Con controllers are proving to be underwhelming, because so few people will actually experience their true potential in 1-2 Switch. If not for any other reason, this is why 1-2 Switch should have been a pack-in game. At least dedicated fans are aware of HD Rumble amongst other features. Without a simple introduction, the average consumer won't even notice that these features are present. Therefore, developers won't bother to spend the extra money and development time implementing support. Where does this leave us? Awfully close to the situation that the Wii U was in. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. The Switch, its marketing, its launch lineup, and its future games are all convincing reasons why it won't suffer the same fate as its predecessor. The Wii U was a complicated mess of a system that the Switch has thankfully learned from. Despite this, it won't be free from all its failures, especially if the issue of feature creep prevails once again. What's the benefit in features that very few developers will utilise? How many games use the Wii U's accelerometer and gyro, or its dual screen capabilities? And who even remembers that it has a camera? This is because the system had too much going on and very little to prove its worth. Ultimately, the Wii U gamepad was almost as expensive as the system itself, and provided such little benefit that the price couldn't be justified. I personally believe that the Switch at its current price is very reasonable, but imagine the market penetration that a cheaper Switch without these bells and whistles would have. The other solution to this issue would be to provide software built into the console that accurately portrays the system's strengths in full detail. This wouldn't have to be 1-2-switch, it could even be a simple program like PictoChat in the DS. The choice to keep the console's features exclusive to an expensive party game is likely going to be the Switch's greatest failing when we look back on the system's launch in the future, as it will have allowed underlying issues of feature creep to initially take hold. Despite my concerns, I do really like the Switch, and I love the unique features it boasts. I just hope it can justify itself.